Rain streaked the window pane as Daniel Reyes settled deeper into the worn leather chair of his cluttered apartment. The dim glow of a flickering desk lamp, casting long shadows across stacks of crumpled papers and old coffee mugs. Outside, the city's relentless drizzle blurred the neon signs into smeared streaks, mirroring the fog clouding his mind. His green eyes, shadowed and tired, flicked over a faded photograph resting on the cluttered desk. Him and Helena Varga, caught in a candid moment at a bustling cafe downtown, her radiant smile contrasting sharply with the cold steel of her gaze in the recent years. He traced the edges of her image with a trembling finger, recalling the first time they met. The vibrant hum of conversation, the aroma of roasted beans, her voice, smooth, confident, captivating. "You write with honesty," she had said that day, her eyes locking onto his as if they shared a secret. But beneath her charm, Daniel had sensed an unsettling edge, like the faint hum of a guitar string taut and ready to snap. Over time, her allure faded into shadows of suspicion, her words laced with subtle manipulations, her laughter often tinged with a hint of menace. That night, after the buzz of the cafe had faded, Daniel remembered confronting her in their small apartment. "You're hiding something," he'd pressed, voice low but firm. She'd smiled then, a cold, calculated smile. "You think I'm capable of that?" she asked, leaning in with a whisper that chilled him. Now, years later, that suspicion had grown into a gnawing certainty. The evidence was clear. Her clandestine dealings, the late-night calls, the nervous glances behind her back. And yet, a part of him still hesitated, haunted by love, turned to betrayal. The rain's rhythmic patter against the glass sounded like a heartbeat, steady but relentless, and Daniel's thoughts spiraled into memories of their volatile marriage. The passionate beginnings, the mounting lies, the inevitable fall into darkness. His hands clenched the arms of the chair as he remembered the day he discovered her involvement in the drug trade. A discovery made in the quiet hours when trust shattered like glass. He'd hesitated then, torn between exposing her and protecting the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could change. But the decision had been made. An anonymous call to the authorities. A choice that would forever alter their lives. Now, sitting alone with the ghost of her smile haunting him from the photograph, Daniel wondered whether justice had truly been served, or if this was merely the beginning of something darker. The city's endless rain seemed to mourn with him, its cold droplets whispering secrets that only he could hear. His mind drifted back to her last words during their final confrontation. "You think you're the hero," Helena had whispered in that same icy tone. "But I'll make sure you pay for what you've done." Her obsession with control, her hunger for revenge, these had festered in her like a poison, turning her into a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. Now, years later, as the storm outside raged on, Daniel understood that her vendetta was far from over. It had only begun to unfold, its dark tendrils creeping closer, threatening to swallow him whole. And as the rain continued to fall, he realized that in exposing her, he had stirred a beast that refused to be tamed. A beast that had now found its way into his prison cell, where the true nightmare was only just beginning. The memory drifted unbidden into Daniel's mind, a vivid flashback that transported him to the early days of their tumultuous relationship. He remembered the first time he saw Helena's piercing eyes glinting under the golden glow of the sunset, her elegant posture radiating a quiet confidence that had drawn him in like a moth to flame. Her grace was intoxicating, the way she moved through the crowded room, as if she alone commanded the attention of everyone around her, her voice smooth and persuasive as she charmed her way through conversations. She had this magnetic quality, an allure that made it impossible to look away, even as a flicker of suspicion crept in. He recalled the late-night conversations where she'd laugh softly, her fingers lightly brushing his arm, her scent lingering, both alluring and elusive. Yet beneath her polished exterior, subtle cracks had begun to show. Small gestures, her avoiding certain questions, her eyes flickering with guarded secrets, had started to unsettle him, though he'd dismissed them as paranoia or his own insecurities. That particular evening, they sat across from each other at their worn kitchen table, the flickering light casting shadows across her face. Daniel hesitated before speaking, voice tense with unspoken doubt. "Helena, I've noticed you've been distant lately. People are talking. I've seen things. Secret meetings, late nights. I just want to understand. Are you hiding something from me?" Her smile was icy, her eyes narrowing slightly as she reached for her glass of wine. "Daniel, you're imagining things. I've told you my life is complicated. You're too caught up in your own suspicions. Maybe you should trust me more instead of digging into things that don't concern you." Her words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the air like a blade. That moment etched itself into his memory, a stark contrast between her captivating elegance and the cold, calculating woman she was becoming. As they argued, her tone remained composed, almost amused, as if she enjoyed stringing him along with riddles he would never fully decipher. And yet, beneath her poised exterior, a flicker of something darker lurked, something that hinted she was already weaving her web, her secrets guarded fiercely behind her polished veneer. Daniel's heart pounded with a mixture of attraction, confusion, and an instinctive dread that he couldn't quite name, but which whispered that her beauty masked a dangerous hidden truth. The image of her luminous gaze, so captivating and yet so guarded, haunted him as he wondered if he'd ever truly know her, or if she had already slipped beyond the reach of his grasp, hiding in the shadows of her own secrets. Late one night, the dim glow of Daniel's phone illuminated his trembling hands as he scrolled through Helena's messages with a mixture of dread and curiosity. His eyes darted across the screen, catching snippets of conversation that sent a shiver down his spine. There in the shadowy depths of her texts were encrypted codes and clandestine exchanges with known drug traffickers, mentions of the drop, the package, and the usual meeting spot. His pulse quickened as he saw her reply to a contact. "Everything's set. No mistakes this time." A phrase that reeked of conspiracy. He leaned closer, the air thick with tension, noticing her swift, almost robotic typing. Her face composed like a portrait of calm, masking the chaos beneath. Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open softly behind him. Helena's silhouette appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she caught sight of his screen. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice smooth but edged with icy suspicion. Daniel, caught in the act, hesitated, then turned his phone toward her with trembling fingers. "Who are these people?" he demanded, voice barely above a whisper. Her face remained unreadable, a practiced mask of innocence. "Just some old friends," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. She stepped into the room with deliberate calm, closing the door behind her, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "You shouldn't be snooping," she murmured, voice steady as steel. Daniel's mind raced. Her denial was thin, fragile, and the evidence on her screen was undeniable. He saw the coded messages, the timestamps aligning with their supposed late-night hours, and he realized that her secret dealings went far deeper than he'd ever imagined. Her denial only fueled his suspicion. She was hiding something. And the more she denied, the more convinced he became that her involvement was not just casual, but meticulous. In that charged silence, Daniel made a silent vow. He would gather proof, expose her true nature, and finally unearth the dangerous truth lurking behind her polished smile. The night had become a battlefield of secrets, and as Helena's cold gaze locked onto his, Daniel sensed that the game was only just beginning. Late into the night, Daniel sat hunched over his cluttered desk, dimly lit only by the flickering glow of his old laptop and the faint, pulsating hum of the city outside his window. Every nerve in his body tensed as he meticulously reviewed the encrypted files he had painstakingly intercepted, the clandestine messages exchanged between Helena and her unknown contacts. His fingers trembled as he clicked through a series of hidden recordings. voice snippets distorted but unmistakable in their menace. The low murmur of Helena's voice, smooth yet laced with menace, echoed softly over the speakers. "If he ever finds out, I'll make sure he regrets it." His heart hammered against his ribs, a mixture of fear and conviction fueling his resolve. Carefully, he copied the files onto a secure drive, sealing his suspicions with every keystroke. Then he picked up his burner phone, voice steady but hushed, and dialed the authorities. "This is Daniel Reyes." He whispered into the receiver, voice tight with determination. "You need to listen carefully. I have evidence, intercepted communications, recordings, that expose Helena Varga's involvement in drug trafficking. She's not just running small-time deals. She's deeply embedded in a network that's dangerous and well-organized. I've seen enough to prove it. But I warn you, she's dangerous. She's not going to go quietly, and she'll do anything to cover her tracks." As he hung up, a cold sweat broke out on his forehead, knowing that this anonymous tip could cost him everything. His safety, his freedom, maybe even his life. But feeling an unshakable sense that justice, no matter how perilous, must be done. Every moment he hesitated, he thought of Helena's icy smile, her manipulations, the lives she'd destroyed, and he felt a brutal clarity. He had to act now, before her web of deceit tightened further around him. His mind raced with the dangerous possibilities, aware that revealing her true nature would ignite a storm he might never survive, but also certain that silence was no longer an option. The weight of his decision pressed heavily on his chest, yet a flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps this act of courage would finally bring her darkness into the light, even if it meant risking everything in the process. Helena's world shattered in a way she had never anticipated, and the moment her mugshot flashed across the television screens and newspapers, a dark fire ignited within her that no amount of shame could extinguish. The elegant veneer she meticulously maintained crumbled as a swarm of reporters and cameras descended upon her like vultures, capturing her red-rimmed eyes, the trembling hand clutching her release papers, and her trembling lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Her once confident stride faltered for a fleeting second, but then her eyes hardened with a ruthlessness that sent chills down her spine. "This isn't over," she whispered through clenched teeth, as she watched her reflection in a cracked mirror during the hurried ride home. A bitter smile curled her lips, sharp and dangerous. "He thinks he can expose me and walk away? No. Daniel Reyes will pay for this humiliation, for stripping away my dignity, for tearing apart my carefully built empire of lies." Her fingers brushed against a leather pouch hidden beneath her coat. Hidden, yet her mind felt its weight like a silent threat. "He's going to regret ever crossing me," she muttered, voice low but edged with venom. That night, as shadows danced across her dimly lit apartment, Helena plotted her revenge with meticulous precision. She replayed fragments of their past, her seductive charm, her calculated manipulations, every smile laced with a hidden dagger. The taste of her downfall was bitter, but it only fueled her obsession. Every ounce of her being was now laser-focused on destroying Daniel. She knew her reputation would be her most potent weapon, so she began weaving a web of deception to trap him. Knowing that betrayal lurked behind every corner, her plans unfolded with cold, calculated elegance. False friendships, whispered threats, secret meetings in the shadowed corners of the city. Helena's mind spun with a singular purpose: to make him suffer as she had, to turn the tables in a brutal game of power and control. And as dawn's first light seeped through the cracked blinds, she silently vowed that her vengeance would be relentless, her obsession with retribution consuming every moment until Daniel Reyes paid for his betrayal. And she would make sure that, in the end, she was the one left standing, unbroken and triumphant in the wreckage of her own destruction. Helena's mind sharpened with a relentless precision as she set her plan into motion, her every move calculated with cold surgical finesse. She knew that to truly destroy Daniel, she had to infiltrate his life from within, camouflaging her intentions behind a facade of friendliness, disguised by a veneer of concern. She approached his closest friends and colleagues. A seemingly benign receptionist, a sympathetic neighbor, a hesitant bartender, each carefully chosen to gather intelligence without raising suspicion. Her eyes, cold yet captivating, flicked between their faces as she feigned genuine interest, whispering softly, "You know, Daniel's been going through a tough time lately. It's such a shame, really. I've always admired his strength." Her voice was smooth and soothing, but beneath that surface lay a razor-sharp edge of manipulation. She listened intently to their stories, filing away every detail about his routines, his daily walks along the rain-slick streets, his late-night visits to the old cafe where he poured out his anxieties in silence, the time he stayed late at his cluttered apartment, poring over case files with a furrowed brow. Helena's obsession drove her to record every movement, every word, obsessively documenting Daniel's habits in her quiet secret notebook. Hidden beneath a false bottom in her purse, she installed tiny, nearly invisible listening devices in his home. Microscopic bugs nestled in the corners of his living room, whispering every private conversation into her eavesdropping app. She monitored his social media activity, scrutinizing his posts and messages, planting subtle coded threats in anonymous emails that appeared harmless on the surface but carried a deadly implication beneath. "You can never be too careful these days," she murmured to herself as she watched him through her discreet cameras, his shadow moving across the dimly lit room while he slept, unaware of her prying gaze. Helena's obsession manifested not only in her meticulous surveillance, but also in her psychological warfare. She would send him cryptic messages. "Some secrets have a way of coming out," or "You're never truly alone," carefully crafted to unsettle him without revealing her hand. Her plan was layered: subtle threats meant to destabilize, false clues to lure him into doubting his perception, and a network of false friendships designed to keep him perpetually paranoid. As she meticulously orchestrated these intricate moves, she relished the thought that soon Daniel would be cornered in her trap, helpless and vulnerable, just as she envisioned. Every smile exchanged, every casual comment, was a piece in her grand chess game. An elaborate dance of deception aimed solely at one goal: to make him suffer the same shattered trust and humiliation she had endured, and ultimately to claim her revenge with the cold satisfaction of a predator finally closing in on her prey. After serving a lengthy sentence for a crime indirectly tied to his exposure of Helena's drug trafficking, Daniel Reyes stepped cautiously into the world beyond prison walls, each step haunted by the ghost of what he'd lost and what might still be lurking in the shadows. The air outside was thick with a damp chill, the sky smeared in dull gray, mirroring his tangled thoughts. Years had softened some edges of his paranoia, but the relentless whisper of Helena's presence never quite faded. She had reappeared in his life under the guise of concern, her voice a gentle, calculated tone that masked the darkness beneath. "Daniel, I've been worried about you," she said softly during their first meeting after his release, her eyes gleaming with false warmth as she handed him a coffee, her fingers lingering a fraction too long. "I just want to see you safe." Her words floated over him like a carefully spun web, familiar yet utterly deceptive. She'd taken on the role of confidant, a beacon of support in his fragile new beginning, while secretly orchestrating her final move. Her facade was impeccable. In public, she seemed genuinely empathetic, her voice soothing, her smile carefully calibrated. Behind closed doors, however, she was a predator, her mind always calculating, each word a tactical weapon. As they sat in a dimly lit cafe, Helena's gaze fluttered with concern, but her eyes flickered with a predator's hunger. "You look different, Daniel," she murmured, voice soft but edged with something darker. "But I know who you are. Stronger, maybe, but still vulnerable." Her words sent a shiver down his spine, but he struggled to piece together her true intent. Her appearance was flawless. She had adopted the role of a victim seeking redemption. But Daniel knew better. He remembered her manipulative charm, the icy coldness she wielded when betrayed, and the countless nights he'd spent awake, questioning whether he'd truly escaped her grasp. Now, facing her again, he felt the familiar prickling of paranoia, the sensation that he was walking into a trap carefully laid beneath her seemingly caring facade. She had woven herself into his fragile existence, setting the stage for her final act, a culmination of her obsession and vengeance. Every encounter, every seemingly innocent gesture was a calculated move in her game. As she leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper, she said, "Be careful, Daniel. Sometimes what we think is behind us isn't gone at all." The words echoed in his mind, a subtle threat cloaked in concern, reminding him that Helena Varga was not just a woman scorned, but a predator, still circling, waiting for her moment to strike with the cold precision of a killer. Daniel leaned forward in the dimly lit room, his brow furrowed as he clutched a crumpled piece of paper. Evidence he'd uncovered that gnawed at his conscience. His voice was tentative, almost pleading, as he looked into Helena's inscrutable eyes. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything lately. About us, about the past. I keep feeling like I'm walking on a tightrope, unsure if I've truly left the nightmare behind. Sometimes I doubt my judgment, Helena. I wonder if I've missed something, if I've overlooked the signs of how deep your obsession runs." His gaze flicked nervously to her face, searching for reassurance, but her expression remained calm, too calm, almost serene, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. She reached out, her fingertips brushing his hand gently, a seemingly comforting gesture that sent a shiver down his spine. "Daniel, you don't have to carry this weight alone," she said softly, her voice velvety, yet with an undertone that hinted at something darker. "Trust me, I've always wanted the best for you. Whatever doubts you have, I can help you see the truth. Sometimes we're afraid of what's real, but that fear keeps us from moving forward." As she spoke, her eyes gleamed with a calculated warmth. Her smile slow and knowing, she subtly pressed her palm against his, her fingers lingering just long enough to leave an imprint, an unspoken reminder of her influence. He hesitated, caught between the fear of losing her again and the desperate hope that she truly cared. Unaware that her words were crafted to lull him into complacency, Helena's mind was already weaving her web tighter. Every smile, every reassuring touch was a carefully staged act designed to deepen his trust, to make him believe she was his ally when, in truth, she was orchestrating his downfall. Her voice softened even more, almost a whisper. "Daniel, sometimes the past is just a shadow. If you look at it the right way, it can become the light that guides us. You have to trust your instincts, but also listen to what I'm telling you. I've seen what's good for us, and I know how to protect you from what's coming." Behind her words lurked a hidden obsession, an unyielding need to control him, to shape his perceptions until he was nothing more than a puppet in her deadly game. And as he sat there, vulnerable and unsuspecting, Helena's subtle influence seeped into his mind, steering his thoughts toward danger, her false reassurance masking the cold truth. She wasn't just reaching out to help him get past his doubts. She was setting the stage for her final, most devastating act. Night unfurled its dark shawl over the city. As Daniel sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the hum of distant traffic blending with the pounding of his own restless thoughts, Helena's shadowy influence was no longer subtle. It had become a malicious symphony orchestrated in the background, creeping into every corner of his life. It started with small, almost unnoticeable disruptions. An angry phone call from his sister claiming she'd heard rumors about him, a misplaced document that vanished just as he needed it most, and a series of anonymous messages hinting he was being watched. Daniel dismissed them as coincidences, convincing himself that paranoia was creeping in after years of stress. But then, the chaos escalated. His phone buzzed violently one evening, and he saw a new message. "She's not who you think she is." His stomach clenched. He looked around. Nothing seemed out of place, yet an icy suspicion grew. When his wife's name appeared in a local newspaper linked to drug trafficking charges, Daniel's heart sank. Helena had somehow managed to manipulate his environment without him noticing, planting false evidence, turning his friends against him, sowing discord in his career. It was as if she had turned his world into a labyrinth of whispered lies and hidden threats. One morning, he found a torn photograph strewn across his driveway. An image of him, innocent but distorted, with Helena's face scrawled sinisterly in red ink across it. His gut twisted. He called her, voice trembling. But she answered with calm, measured words. "Daniel, you're overthinking again. You have to stay focused, trust me. I'm doing this for us." Yet, behind her tranquil tone, her eyes sparkled with dangerous intent. She had become a master of manipulation, a puppeteer pulling strings he couldn't see. Her presence infiltrated his dreams, her whispering voice echoing in his mind, urging him to dismiss every warning. When a close friend warned him, "Be careful, Helena's not what she seems," Daniel brushed it off, desperate to cling to the fragile thread of normalcy. Still, the signs persisted. His phone's GPS flickered without explanation, a shadow lurking just beyond the edge of his vision. And strange, untraceable footsteps in his apartment late at night. The most troubling moment came when his daughter, worried and trembling, confided, "Dad, I think someone's watching us. Helena said I should be careful around strangers." Daniel's instincts, dulled by years of deception, told him she was just overreacting. But unease gnawed at him. Helena's calculated chaos was her way of asserting dominance, of eroding his sense of security until he was disoriented, helpless. She wanted him to believe he was losing his grip, that his reality was slipping away. Every attempt he made to piece together what was happening only deepened his confusion. Each discovery was met with her carefully crafted alibi or a convincing lie. Meanwhile, her obsession drove her to escalate her tactics, planting false evidence of wrongdoing in his workspace, staging encounters where she appeared as his confidant, but was secretly setting traps. The walls seemed to close in, and Daniel's mind teetered on the brink of collapse, caught in her relentless game of chaos and control. His world, once clear, had become a maze of shadows, each turn bringing him closer to the devastating truth. Helena was orchestrating his downfall with undying precision, and sooner or later he would have to confront the nightmare she had meticulously crafted. Late one cold, rain-soaked night, Daniel sat hunched over his flickering laptop, the dim glow illuminating the lines of encrypted code that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. His heart pounded as he scrolled through the cryptic message he'd received just hours earlier. A digital whisper from an anonymous source, warning him to watch out for Helena's next move. The words shimmered on the screen. "She's planning something. Be careful. She's not done yet." His fingers trembled as he deciphered the message further, revealing a series of coded signals hinting at Helena's latest obsession, her desire to control and annihilate him through psychological warfare. The warning felt more like a lifeline than a threat. With meticulous precision, Daniel reached for the small box he had secretly ordered. Tiny, almost invisible devices designed to intercept her covert signals and record her clandestine activities. He carefully placed them in the corners of his apartment, behind picture frames, inside the hollow spaces of bookshelves where her prying eyes wouldn't reach. As he pressed the final device into position, a faint shiver ran down his spine, knowing Helena's mind games would only intensify. No sooner had he finished than an alert blinked on his screen. A new message from the encrypted channel. "You think you're safe. You're only seeing what I want you to see." His stomach clenched. Helena's voice suddenly echoed in his mind, her words whispered in a mocking tone. "Did you really think those gadgets would stop me? I know your every move, Daniel. I see your fear." It was then that he noticed a small, almost imperceptible change. A subtle flicker in the shadows of his apartment, a misplaced object that seemed out of place. Her psychological warfare was relentless. She was manipulating his perceptions, playing mind games through coded signals, false alarms, and invisible threats. He remembered her previous threats, her voice dripping with menace. "You can hide, Daniel, but you can't run from me. I'll be inside your head, long after you think you've won." Now, with the surveillance devices humming softly, he felt a strange mixture of dread and resolve. Helena's obsession knew no bounds. Her need to dominate, to break him psychologically, was a dark symphony of manipulation. He knew this was only the beginning. Her game was far from over. Every time he thought he was one step ahead, she'd shift the tune, weaving her control into the fabric of his reality, until he doubted everything. His senses, his sanity, even his own reflection. The shadows in the apartment stretched longer, darker, as if taking on a life of their own, echoing Helena's twisted obsession to keep him ensnared in her web. Daniel clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "I see your game, Helena, and this time, I won't fall for your trap." But deep inside, he wondered, how much of what he saw was real, and how much was her poisonous illusion? The fight for his mind had begun. Under the sickly glow of flickering fluorescent lights in the dimly lit parking lot, Helena's figure emerged like a shadow, summoned from the depths of his worst nightmares. She was trembling, not from cold, but from a white-hot mixture of rage and obsession that twisted her features into a mask of dangerous intent. Her eyes, usually so captivating, now burned with a frenetic resolve. And her voice, when she finally spoke, trembled with a raw, primal edge. "You think you can just walk away from what you did? Think again, Daniel!" She spat, her voice cracking as she closed the space between them with reckless urgency. Her hands clutched at his collar, trembling but fierce, and her breath ragged as she pressed her body against his, the heat of her rage radiating in every trembling motion. "You destroyed my life, my reputation, my freedom. And now you think you can live comfortably, hidden behind your lies? You're wrong. I won't let you forget. I won't let you escape." Her words oozed like venom, but her trembling betrayed her. She was on the verge of losing control, a dangerous cocktail of obsession and fury spilling over. Daniel, caught between shock and dread, instinctively took a step back, his eyes darting to the twisted, desperate figure that had once been his wife. Beautiful, charming, now a vessel of rage. Helena's grip tightened, and she suddenly jerked him forward, her voice lowering to a sinister whisper. "I'm going to erase you, Daniel. I'll make sure everyone sees what you really are. Nothing but a liar, a manipulator, someone who thought he could play God with my life. And if I have to tear you apart here, in front of everyone, so be it." Her breath hitched, her face contorting with a fierce, bloodshot determination that sent a shiver down his spine. Then, without warning, her hand shot out, clutching a jagged piece of metal she'd hidden in her pocket. Something she'd brought with her, an extension of her obsession to obliterate him completely. Her eyes flashed with a mad, unhinged resolve as she pressed the cold, sharp edge against his throat. "This isn't just about revenge," she hissed, voice trembling with feral intensity. "This is about reclaiming my power, erasing the man who stole everything from me. And I'll do it, Daniel. I swear I will. Right here, right now." The world seemed to hold its breath as her trembling hand hovered dangerously close, and for a moment, the darkness in her eyes shone brighter than the flickering street lamp, revealing a woman consumed entirely by her obsession, willing to cross every moral boundary to reclaim her control. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears, every instinct screaming at him to run, to fight. But he could only stand frozen, the cold metal pressing against his skin as he realized. This was her final, visceral act of vengeance, a twisted attempt to rewrite their story in blood and fear. The cold, sterile fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Daniel sat in the stark interrogation room, the weight of false accusations pressing heavily on his chest. His hands trembled slightly as the detectives laid out the mounting evidence. Fingerprints on the weapon he never touched, a trail of anonymous phone calls leading straight to his number, and a witness who had been paid to testify against him. "You expect me to believe I did all this?" he demanded, voice raw with disbelief. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of Helena's manipulation. But she was nowhere to be seen. Yet her presence haunted him like a shadow. The detective leaned in, voice clipped and deliberate. "You were found near the scene, Daniel. And the victim swears you threatened him just hours before the attack." The words hit him like a blow, sinking into his mind with relentless precision. His stomach churned as flashes of his life crumbled. His reputation tarnished beyond repair. Colleagues turning their backs, friends whispering behind his back. All of it orchestrated, he realized, by Helena's quiet, venomous hand. She had always been a master manipulator, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even the most seasoned investigators had fallen prey. The worst part was the silence in his mind, the gnawing suspicion that Helena's plan was more complex than mere revenge. She had engineered this entire chaos to cast him as a villain, to strip him of everything he held dear, including his dignity. And as the detectives read him his rights and prepared to transport him to prison, Daniel's heart sank into a dark abyss. His voice cracked as he looked directly at the officer, desperation bleeding into his tone. "You've got the wrong man. Helena's behind all this, I swear. She's the one pulling the strings, playing me like a puppet. You have to see it. She's lying, framing me for a crime I didn't commit." But no one listened. The evidence was damning, the trap closing around him like a noose. His mind raced, desperately grasping at memories. Helena's twisted smile, her fake tears, the way she'd once whispered promises of love that now sounded like lies. She had set him up, all to satisfy her obsession with control, with rewriting their story in blood. And now, trapped behind cold steel, Daniel understood that her manipulation was far from over. Her final act of vengeance was yet to come, and he was unwittingly cast as the sacrificial pawn in her deadly game. The prison yard was a battlefield of shadows and cold steel, where the air hung heavy with silence, broken only by distant murmurs and the metallic clang of gates. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding against his ribcage. As Helena emerged from the shadows like a specter, her presence commanding and terrifying all at once. Her eyes, once alluring and mysterious, now burned with a ferocious intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Without a hint of hesitation, she approached him, her steps deliberate, each one echoing across the desolate concrete. "You thought you could bury me forever," she rasped, her voice a venomous whisper that cut through the tense atmosphere. "You think I'd let you walk away with your little secrets? No, Daniel, not this time." Her lips curled into a cold, cruel smile as she reached into her pocket, revealing a small, jagged shard of metal, a weapon she had hidden all along. "You see?" she continued, voice trembling with a mixture of fury and obsession. "I've spent years building my empire again, all to come back and show you just how much you've destroyed me. And now? Now I'm going to make sure everyone here sees what you've done, what you've made me become." Her gaze flicked around the gathered inmates, a dangerous glint igniting behind her eyes. "You thought you were clever, Daniel, exposing my secrets, tearing me down in the eyes of the world. But you forgot one thing. Obsession isn't easily broken. It festers, it consumes, and it finds its way back, even here, behind these walls." She stepped closer, voice rising, reaching a fever pitch. "Today is not about justice. It's about vengeance. I will make sure everyone knows how I felt, how your betrayal left me hollow. And if I have to kill you right here in front of everyone, so be it. If I can't have you in life, then I'll take you in death." Her words dripped with the venom of a woman betrayed and consumed by her need for retribution, a twisted symphony of obsession and fury, finally unleashed amid the cold, unforgiving silence of the prison yard. Daniel's face paled as her intentions became painfully clear. The final, brutal act of a woman who refused to let go, who saw only destruction as her ultimate victory. Daniel's heart pounded as he stood in the shadowed corridor outside the prison visiting room, clutching the crumpled note he had scribbled earlier. The blueprint for his final move. This was his gamble, the only way to confront Helena's madness head-on before she could strike again. He had arranged for a rare open-to-the-public community event, where families, officials, and even reporters would be present. An assembly that would give him the cover he needed to turn her obsession into her undoing. When the guards finally unlocked the door, he stepped inside, eyes scanning the room filled with hushed voices, the hum of distant footsteps, and the flickering fluorescent lights casting a cold pall over everything. Helena was already there, seated across from him, her piercing gaze sharper than ever, her lips curling into a faint, almost welcoming smile. "Daniel," she greeted softly, her voice silky yet edged with something dangerous. "I see you finally come to say goodbye." Her fingers brushed the rim of her trembling cup, but her eyes betrayed her calm exterior, an obsession burning beneath the surface, eager for her moment of ultimate control. Daniel took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he stepped forward, voice steady but resolute. "Today isn't about goodbye, Helena. It's about truth." As he spoke, he pulled out a small microphone, the room falling into an uneasy silence. "I've come to show everyone what you're really capable of, what you've been hiding behind your charm. The violence, the obsession, the madness." His gaze locked onto her as he pressed a button on his portable recorder, the device capturing every word. "You've spent years trying to manipulate me, to rewrite your story. But today, I'm exposing everything." Helena's eyes widened for a fleeting moment, then narrowed into a dangerous glare. She shifted in her seat, voice rising with a calculated calm. "You think you're clever, Daniel, but obsession doesn't die with exposure. It only waits for the right moment." Before she could finish, Daniel moved swiftly, revealing a series of photographs he had hidden. Images of her clandestine meetings, coded messages scrawled on scraps of paper, and surveillance footage of her lurking in the shadows near his house. "This is what obsession looks like," he said, voice echoing across the room. "And it's been driving you all this time." Her face twisted in fury, but she kept her composure until the moment her mask cracked and her obsession turned into raw, unfiltered rage. She stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists, voice trembling with venom. "You think you've won, Daniel? No, this is just the beginning. You can't outrun what you've awakened." She reached into her coat, revealing a small, sharp object, her desperation manifesting as violence. But Daniel was ready. In a swift, practiced motion, he stepped back, pulling out a hidden device, a small alarm, triggered to blare loudly, filling the room with deafening noise. The guards rushed in just as Helena lunged forward, her eyes blazing with madness. "You'll regret this," she hissed, voice trembling with obsession and fury. "I will find you no matter where you hide, and I will make sure everyone knows what you've done." Her words echoed as security officers tackled her to the ground, the chaos erupting around her. But Daniel's mind was already racing, knowing that in that moment, Helena's obsession had been laid bare for all to see, and that her final deadly act was only just beginning to unravel. This risky confrontation, staged in the uncertain arena of a public gathering, was his last chance to turn her own fixation against her, an unorthodox, visceral chess move that could either shatter her obsession forever or pull him deeper into the darkness she thrived in. Helena's eyes burned with a fierce, unhinged desperation as she lunged forward, her hand clutching a small, concealed object, the jagged edge of a hidden blade that had been pressed against her palm in a silent, frantic prayer. The chaos of the crowded, dimly lit room seemed to dissolve into a short, blurry space as her body tensed, weight shifting with raw fury. "You think you can just walk away?" she hissed through clenched teeth, voice trembling with a mix of rage and despair. Her arm shot out with reckless abandon, aiming to pierce him through the side, her fingers trembling around the cold metal. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. He barely had time to react as her momentum carried her closer, the blade glinting viciously in the flickering fluorescent light. "You ruined me!" she spat, her voice cracking, wild and unrestrained. "You think I'll let you walk free after what you've done?" Her body collided with his, her grip tightening on the weapon, a desperate, visceral act fueled by years of obsession and humiliation. Sparks of adrenaline exploded through his veins as he instinctively grabbed her wrist, trying to wrest the weapon away. But her grip was unyielding, her face twisted in a mask of madness. She screamed, a guttural sound full of fury and pain. "You betrayed me! I won't let you take everything from me. This is the only way to end it." The room seemed to spin as she pushed forward, her weight leaning into him with reckless abandon, her eyes wide with madness and a need for annihilation. The sound of her frantic breaths echoed in his ears, mingling with the sharp scrape of metal against flesh, an echo of obsession spiraling into chaos. In that intense, frenzied moment, the line between love and hatred blurred into a dangerous, visceral clash, with Helena driven by a monstrous resolve to erase her shame, even if it meant risking her own ruin. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat pounding like a warning as Daniel fought to keep her at bay, knowing that her obsession had finally spilled over into deadly, unrestrained violence, an act born of desperation, madness, and the unquenchable desire to obliterate the man who had once been her everything. The dim light flickered as Daniel's voice cut through the tense silence, a calculated whisper designed to unravel Helena's carefully constructed obsession. "You think you're in control, Helena," he said softly, a cruel smile curling his lips. "But control is just an illusion, something you cling to because you're afraid of facing the truth about yourself." Her eyes widened as he reached into his pocket, revealing a small cracked mirror he had hidden beneath his shirt. "Look at yourself," he urged calmly, holding the mirror so she could see her reflection. Her fierce, beautiful face twisted with paranoia, obsession, and unspoken shame. "Tell me what you see when you look into this. Do you see the woman who used to love, or the monster you've become?" Helena's breath hitched as her gaze darted from his face to the mirror, her hands trembling. "What are you doing?" she demanded, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. Daniel stepped closer, voice low, steady, almost like a hypnotist guiding her into her own mind. "You've built your world around control, Helena, but it's all a house of cards. Your reflection reveals the real you, the one you hide behind your manipulations, your lies, your obsession." Her eyes flickered with a hint of recognition, yet her mind was caught in a storm of chaos. Daniel's fingers brushed her cheek gently, an intimate gesture that sent a shiver through her, before he pressed the mirror into her hands. "Look," he whispered. "Just look." Helena's eyes locked onto her reflection, as if seeing it for the first time, her brow furrowing as fragments of her obsession fractured under the weight of reality. The mirror caught her trembling lips, the shadows under her eyes, the flicker of vulnerability that she desperately attempted to suppress. For a long moment she stood frozen, lost in her own image, her grip tightening around the glass. Then a sob escaped her throat, raw and jagged, a crack in her emotional armor. Her eyes darted back to Daniel, her voice choked. You're trying to break me!" She spat, but her voice wavered, betraying her. Daniel's expression softened just enough to convey a silent, cruel victory. "No, Helena, I'm showing you the truth. The only way to truly destroy someone like you is to make them see themselves for what they are, shattered, trapped, and powerless." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision, as the obsession that had fueled her for years crumbled into fragments scattered across her face. She clenched her fists, her mind teetering on the edge of madness. And in that moment, Daniel saw her downfall, her obsession, her need for dominance, her shame, all laid bare in the mirror's fragile reflection. It was her own fixation that betrayed her, turning her into a prisoner of her own obsession. And Daniel's quiet, relentless manipulation had sealed her fate, an irreversible mirror into her soul that she could never escape. In the dim, flickering, fluorescent light of the prison visitation room, Helena's trembling hands clenched the cold metal bars as her eyes darted wildly between Daniel and the shadowed figures behind her. Her breath hitched, face flushed with a toxic mix of rage and desperation as she reached into her coat, clutching a small, worn photograph, faded edges curling like scorched paper. "You think you've won?" she hissed, voice trembling with a venomous edge. "But I've got one last card to play." Daniel's eyes narrowed, tension mounting in his jaw as he stepped closer, his voice eerily calm. "What are you hiding, Helena? What secret have you been clutching all these years?" Her nostrils flared as she hesitated, then suddenly yanked out the photograph and pressed it against the glass, revealing a familiar face, her own in a photograph taken years before, standing beside a man with a smug smile and a drug stash tucked into the folds of her coat. "You see," she whispered, voice cracking, "I wasn't just a trafficker. I was also an informant, feeding the cartel information for years. That's how I kept my power, my control, and I told no one, not even you." Her eyes flickered with unhinged triumph as she stepped back, voice rising above the tension. "You thought you knew me, Daniel, but you were just a pawn in my game, and now everyone will see who I truly am." The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening with the weight of her confession. Daniel's breath hitched, realization dawning like a thunderclap. She had woven a web of lies so intricate, so deeply rooted in her obsession to dominate, that her entire facade was built on a foundation of concealment and betrayal. Helena's gaze hardened, her obsession spiraling into a manic crescendo. "You're finished!" she spat, voice raw with fury. "Because I'll make sure the world sees you for the monster you've always been." As her trembling hand reached into her pocket, Daniel saw the glint of a small, sharp object, a symbol of her unraveling mind, the culmination of years of obsession, now poised to destroy everything. In that frozen moment, Helena's fragile psyche cracked wide open, exposing her deepest secrets in a public arena. Her obsession no longer a weapon, but a shattering mirror that reflected her own destruction. Daniel's eyes flicked to the nearby guards, knowing that her obsession had become her undoing, and with a heavy, defeated sigh, he prepared for the chaos to unfold, knowing that her obsession had finally led her to the edge of her own ruin. The quiet hum of the evening settled around, the old pier where Daniel found himself standing alone, the salty breeze whispering past weathered pilings and carrying memories he had long tried to suppress. The rain had stopped hours earlier, leaving wet cobblestones that shimmered faintly under the dying amber glow of the setting sun. He reached into his pocket and fingered the small, worn photograph they once shared, a black and white snapshot of a young Helena, radiant and full of life, taken during their fleeting moments of happiness before obsession had clawed its way into her soul. His eyes lingered on the image, a fragile reminder of what once was and what was lost forever. His breath fogged in the cool air as he exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past pressing down, yet strangely lighter now that the storm had passed. He had finally seen her for what she truly was, an insatiable force of obsession that had nearly consumed him, transforming her from lover into predator, and himself into a hunted soul. "It's over," he whispered softly, voice trembling but steady, clutching the photograph as if holding on to a lifeline. "You're finally free from her grip, Helena. Whatever twisted games she played, whatever darkness she hid behind her eyes, it's all exposed now." His gaze drifted across the empty horizon, where shadows danced like ghosts, reminders that some wounds, no matter how deep, could eventually begin to heal if given enough time. He remembered her fierce intensity, The way her voice could turn from honeyed charm to razor-sharp threat in a heartbeat. How her obsession had mutated into a monster that threatened everyone around her, including herself. Now, standing here in this quiet sanctuary, he felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that the nightmare was finally over. Sorrow for the years lost in her labyrinth of lies. He took a slow step back, leaning against a weathered post, eyes fixed on the fading light as if waiting for the final piece of closure to settle. "You wanted to destroy me," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "But all you've done is shatter yourself in the process, and I guess that's the real price of obsession. When it finally breaks free, it's the one left standing in the ruins, staring at the wreckage of everything it once loved." His fingers brushed the photograph one last time, before slipping it into his jacket pocket. As he turned away from the pier, the shadows swallowed him. But a faint, tentative peace lingered, a fragile hope that perhaps someday he could put this chapter behind him and forge a new beginning out of the ashes of their chaos. Standing alone on the rain-slick pier, Daniel gazed at the horizon where the sky melted into a tumult of gray and crimson, a mirror to the chaos he had endured. The weight of years pressed down on him. Years of betrayal, obsession, and the haunting realization that darkness is not always a distant shadow, but sometimes a mirror reflecting back from within. His fingers brushed the roughened edges of the photograph he had clutched tremblingly earlier. An image of Helena, her eyes sharp as razors, her smile a mask stretched thin with calculated cruelty. And he knew that the true battle had never truly been with her. It had been with the monster of obsession she had awakened within him, one that thrived on control and retribution, blinding him to the truth that the real enemy was the darkness he had carried in his own soul all along. "You wanted to destroy me," he whispered into the wind, voice thick with exhausted sorrow. "But I see now that it wasn't just about revenge. It was about confronting the parts of ourselves we refused to face. The fears, the guilt, the obsession that eats us alive." His gaze flicked to the shadows where she had once stood, her presence now just a ghost of guilt and rage. Maybe it's time I stop fighting her and start facing what's hidden inside. Because the real scars aren't what she left behind. They're what I've carried, what I've allowed to fester all these years. He took a deep breath, inhaling the cold, metallic air that stung his lungs, and slowly, deliberately, turned his back on the wreckage. His steps echoed softly as he moved away, the rain washing over him, cleansing the dirt and blood of his past. The past was a twisted labyrinth of lies and betrayal, but in its center lay a truth he could finally accept. That understanding and forgiveness only come when we dare to confront the darkness within ourselves, not in others. As the city's distant hum faded into silence, Daniel felt an odd, fragile peace emerge. One born not of resolution, but of acknowledgement. The journey through obsession, betrayal, and the shadows of his own soul had been long, brutal, and unforgiving. Yet in this moment, standing at the edge of what once seemed an insurmountable abyss, he realized that true redemption wasn't about eradicating the darkness, but learning to live with it, accepting that the scars, the betrayals, and the ghosts of the past would always be part of him. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was enough to finally let go. Daniel settled onto the battered wooden bench beneath a solitary oak, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, as rain began to steady into a gentle, rhythmic patter. The droplets shimmered in the dull glow of dying streetlights, creating a mosaic of silver on the cracked pavement around him. He stared at the falling rain, feeling the coolness seep through his jacket and settle into his bones. The same cold that had haunted him through years of betrayal and violence. His eyes traced the slow descent of each drop, mirroring the weight of his memories. Helena's obsession, her relentless pursuit of vengeance, and the fragile, fleeting hope that justice might finally drown in the pouring storm. He remembered her voice, sharp and commanding, echoing in the shadows of the prison yard. "You think you can escape me? You've only made me more determined, Daniel." Her face haunted him, not just in nightmares, but in quiet moments of reflection. Her eyes, once captivating, now cold and calculating, a mirror to her fractured soul. He clenched his fists, feeling the rough grain of the wood pressing into his palms, grounding him against the swirling chaos inside. The rain washed over his face and down his neck, washing away the dust of his past, yet leaving behind scars that shimmered in the dim light. Reminders of love lost, trust shattered, and the darkness that lurked beneath his own resolve. He reached into his pocket and touched the small worn photo of the two of them from better days, now faded and torn at the edges. "It's over," he whispered softly, voice thick with emotion. "You didn't win, Helena. You almost did. But I'm still standing." His gaze drifted skyward as the storm intensified, clouds churning like the tumult within him, and he felt a strange, quiet clarity settle inside. The rain's relentless rhythm became a lullaby, cleansing him of the venom of revenge, of the ghosts that had haunted him so long. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe, to accept that some wounds would never fully heal, but that he could still find peace in surrendering, in letting the rain wash away the darkness. As he pushed to his feet and turned away from the somber scene, his steps echoed softly on the wet pavement, each one lighter than the last. He knew Helena's obsession would never truly die, but he also understood that the greatest act of defiance was simply to move forward, free from the chains of past betrayals, shielded by the rain's quiet renewal, ready to face whatever dawn awaited beyond this storm.